Just a warning, this episode contains graphic descriptions of violence and makes reference to racist and sexist slurs. Sensitive listeners may want to skip this one. Last July, Kaciana Camel was walking with her then 2-year-old daughter on Elmira Road. They had just seen someone fleeing after stealing an electric bicycle. Now, the bicycle's owner was shouting at her. He accused her of being involved in the theft. He called her racist and sexist slurs. Camel, who told the man she was pregnant, said he threatened to deflate her. So she called her fiancé, who told her to call 911. But the police didn't respond soon enough to intervene. Her fiancé, Autreyu Massaline, did. Massaline later told the jury he grabbed the closest knife and raced over. It was a Cuisinart kitchen knife, 8 inches long, purple. What happened next would later become the subject of a complex criminal case touching on race, 911 response times, and the question of self-defense. I'm Megan Zerez. This week on Backstory, the trial of Autreyu Massaline. First, a quick break. Stay with us.
Independent journalism isn't guaranteed. It's built. Join the readers who power the Ithaca Voice and make a gift today at ithacavoice.org.
This is Backstory, the podcast powered by the newsroom of the Ithaca Voice. I'm Megan Zerez. It's Tuesday, June 2nd. When does an act of violence become an act of self-defense? Does the use of racist, sexist slurs make a verbal threat more credible? And how long should someone expect to wait for the police when they feel they're in danger? Those are some of the questions jurors were asked to consider in the trial of Autreyu Massaline. My colleague Haley Potter was in the courtroom for it all. Hello, Haley.
Hi, Megan.
We touched on the prelude to this incident in the intro, and we will go a bit deeper, but let's resolve the cliffhanger. What happened after Autreyu Massaline arrived on the scene?
The entire conflict kind of boils down to 3 seconds, which is what was made pretty clear by the prosecution and the defense. When Massaline rounded the corner of Elmira Road and Plain Street, Edward Warren was rounding the corner at the same time. There was a fence, which he said was obstructing his view. Apparently they hadn't seen each other, and then all of a sudden it all boils over, and there was one single, motion, single stab, and it was all over. Massaline says he doesn't remember it happening. He basically blacked out during it, and then he left, and so did Camel, and then bystanders had to help administer first aid, did what they could, but eventually Warren died the next day.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the main people in this case, and let's start with the victim, Edward Warren. Tell me about him.
Warren was a 54-year-old white man. He was kind of a complicated person, from what I've gathered from talking to his wife and, the testimony that was heard in court. But complicated. He had a traumatic brain injury. He had some hearing loss. And he also had some issues with alcohol as well.
There was a series of interactions that Warren had with Kaciana Camel that sparked his death. Tell me about Kaciana Camel.
Camel, she's a 22-year-old black woman, and her and Massaline have been together for a long time. They've been together since she was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah. She has 2 kids with Massaline.
The younger of the two was born after this incident. Massaline was in jail this entire time through the birth of this baby, the boy who's now 6 months old.
Mm-hmm. So she was planning on grilling with Massaline's mom that day. She went out for errands, and that's why she was at Elmira Road, when she was.
And finally, let's move on to her fiancé, the defendant, Autreyu Massaline.
Yeah, he's 26 years old. From what was described in the trial, he really seems to struggle with anxiety. He was seen during the trial wearing a mask pretty much always. And that was something that the defense chalked up to anxiety as to why he wears that mask. When he testified, he took it off, and that was something that defense attorney Jerome Miarczyk said was remarkable, that he was able to do that without the mask, because it's such a big issue in his life.
Yeah, I mean, also if you're on trial for murder, it's bound to cause anxiety in anybody. One thing that you mentioned to me is that both Kaciana Camel and Autreyu Massaline struggled with anxiety kind of together.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about it more, but they were, on the phone with each other during this incident, and that's not unusual. Camel had said that they are always on the phone in case something ever happens.
Wow. And we should disclose that I was in the jury pool. I obviously was not selected. But I remember when they walked him into the courtroom, I was just blown away by how young he looked. Like, to me, he looked like he was in high school. He's not a very big dude, Massaline.
Yeah. I mean, the same thing struck me when I first saw him as well. He looks very young.
Yeah, and didn't say much,
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go over the details of what happened exactly that day. There's a lot that happened between the moment when Warren's bike is stolen and he starts threatening Camel to the moment of the actual stabbing.
The whole thing started around 8:10 p.m. on July 24th. Camel was walking along Elmira Road near the Ithaca Reuse Center. She's pushing her daughter in the stroller. She was, I believe, 6 months pregnant at the time.
Oh, wow.
As she's walking, she sees a person dressed in black steal Edward Warren's bicycle. Warren turns around and assumes falsely that Camel was involved in this theft and starts demanding the bicycle back. She says she has nothing to do with it, and the threats and slurs began. She said he had called her the N-word, the C-word. She said he had threatened to beat her ass. She also testified that when she told him that she was pregnant, he threatened to deflate her.
Wow.
Yeah, what she said. And push her stroller down. That was another thing she had mentioned. There was a lot of details about those threats.
Not just threatening her, but like threatening this very young child and
Yes.
an unborn child as well.
Yes. At the time, Massaline was on the phone with Camel during the confrontation. Like we had said, they were usually on the phone together. She tried to get away, and then he began to chase her.
Wow.
She ran into the Dream Smoke Shop and, waiting for this whole thing to kind of calm down. As that was happening, there was an acquaintance of Camel's who saw what was going on.
And they were just driving by.
They were just, driving by, and they thought she was in trouble. And so they stopped by, and while she was in the store, one of the acquaintances was outside trying to, diffuse the situation with Warren.
And they managed to do that.
Yeah, eventually it seems like it calmed down. Camel was told she couldn't stay in the shop any longer. She comes outside, she talks to the acquaintances. They're like, "Are you okay?" They offer her a ride. She said she probably couldn't fit her stroller in their car, so she'll just go back. It seems like he's gone away. But he hasn't gone away. He's still there.
Warren.
Yes. So the whole thing kind of starts again. Massaline told her to call 911 twice throughout this. About 8:18, Massaline leaves his and Camel's apartment on 3rd Street, and he takes an 8-inch purple knife with him.
Yeah.
The closest knife. The defense made it clear that he was scared and wanted to protect his family, is what they said. While this is happening, while he's left the apartment, the second interaction starts.
Right, because Warren is still coming after her.
Yes, to the point where it's drawn attention from surrounding people. Across the street was Cantrip, carding games. Multiple people who were in the store, They were in the middle of a Magic the Gathering tournament during this, and they came out trying to see what was going on. At that point, Jordan Robinson, an employee at the card and game store, comes out and he calls 911. Around this time, Camel has also called 911. They've both reported it as harassment. Mm-hmm. While they're waiting, Robinson asks Camel, do you want to come inside the store? She reportedly told him that, no, we're good, my man is on the way. She said during her testimony, after being yelled at by a man, she didn't feel particularly safe going in a store with more men, you know, so...
And the people at the smoke shop apparently kicked her out.
Yes. So she just wasn't feeling safe kind of no matter what. That call was made about 8:27, and there wasn't a police officer dispatched before, the stabbing happened around 8:35. So it was 8 minutes in between when that original harassment call happened and the stabbing took place.
Wow, this all unfolded so quickly.
Yes.
You are not kidding about that. Just in that amount of time, everything.
Yeah, the prosecution had said it seemed like at that point Warren was walking towards the corner, which they said was him, de-escalating. He was
walking off.
At that point is when, Massaline had said that he heard Warren say, "I'm going to fucking kill you."
Wow.
So
that's the first thing as he rounds the corner and arrives.
Yeah, and then after that, the stabbing took place. That was the 3 seconds. Massaline leaves. Camel leaves. Warren, he stumbles across the street. Bystanders realize what's going on. They didn't even know what happened.
Even Camel said she didn't know what happened at first.
She said she thought it was a punch.
Yeah.
Massaline, too, said blacked out and didn't even realize. He thought maybe he had been stabbed. He didn't even know, he said, what went on.
Whose blood it all was.
Yeah. So Massaline then went to Titus Towers.
The apartment complex.
He drops the knife because he said he just wanted it gone from his hands. He said he thought he was stabbed, so he took off the hoodie to check for stab wounds. And then later, they both reconvene at his mother's house for the barbecue.
Wow.
Yeah. Massaline said at that point, and Camel said they didn't realize what exactly happened because they left right after. So the next day, they had found out that Warren had died.
Whoa.
And Camel said that Massaline had a breakdown, an emotional breakdown, realizing what had happened.
When they leave the scene, there's the final 911 call, as far as we know, that's connected to this incident.
Yes.
Is the 911 call reporting the actual stabbing.
So Jordan Robinson calls 911 again.
And he's, the employee at this card store.
Yes, yeah. He calls 911 again and said, I just called about harassment. Now this is a stabbing. So.
Yeah. Ultimately, for the 2 harassment calls, the police didn't respond, but in regards to the stabbing call, police ultimately did arrive, and so did an ambulance. They were able to take Warren, and ultimately he died the next day in the hospital. So the district attorney chose to bring this case with a charge of second-degree murder for the stabbing. And there was another charge, and we'll get into that a bit later. But just to clarify, what are the requirements of proving second-degree murder? What does that mean?
So second-degree murder is essentially killing someone with intent but not premeditation.
Okay.
The defense made pretty clear that Autreyu, as a young black male, race was such an important topic in this. He was scared. Also, Camel was scared as a young black woman by herself with her kid and pregnant. Massaline wanted to protect his family.
So what did the prosecutors say to that argument, that this was, sort of an action of panic?
Yeah, the prosecutors made it really clear. They condemned Warren's actions.
Right, the victim's actions.
Yeah, the victim's actions. And said that this should have been a different trial. It should have been Edward Warren on trial for what he said and did that day.
Wow.
But that Massaline made that decision for everyone, and that trial will never get to happen now. The big defense argument was he was panicked, it was self-defense, and prosecutors were saying, well, you could have at least tried harder to resolve it without immediately stabbing him.
They had argued that because it all happened so quickly, Warren might not even have been aware that Massaline even had a knife.
Yeah, because again, it was 3 seconds.
Yeah.
There was really no words exchanged, essentially.
Right.
So that's the big argument from the prosecution side. At the same time, you have the defense who is saying throughout the trial and in their opening statements and in closing statements, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback the situation. Easy to think about what could have been done better in hindsight, even, when it comes to that stabbing itself.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we'll talk about what happened after Warren was stabbed. Stay with us.
Backstory is supported by Cayuga Health and Arnott Health, members of Centralis Health, connecting our communities with accessible, compassionate care that's built around you. From same-day appointments to long-term wellness support, Centralis Health helps you stay healthy and informed. Learn more at centralishealth.org.
This is Backstory. I'm Megan Zerez, here with my colleague Haley Potter. Before the break, we talked about the lead-up to the actual stabbing. Haley, tell me, how was Warren succumbed to his injuries?
The doctor who performed the autopsy said Warren's aorta was severed, the pancreas was punctured.
Oh, wow.
The hospital didn't realize right away that aorta was cut. After the stabbing happened, you had the guys who, 10 minutes ago, were over at the card store playing Magic the Gathering, were on the street trying to administer first aid. They did the best they could, but, you lose so much blood. There was a lot of criticism put on law enforcement through this trial from the defense, if they had arrived within those 8 minutes. And many of the witnesses that the prosecution brought to the stand brought up that law enforcement were tied up at the time at a scene on the Commons at Benjamin Peters. Somebody was thrown through a glass window, and that can even be heard in the 911 calls. There's confusion with the dispatchers. They're asking Jordan Robinson, the employee at the game store, is there broken glass there? Or added a whole layer of confusion to things.
The detail about the dispatcher mentioning the broken glass, it just paints such a picture of chaos, confusion over there. Yeah.
The prosecution had noted that comment about deflating Camel, she hadn't mentioned that during the 911 call. I don't know if that would have changed things. But the prosecutors were kind of pointing out the dispatchers followed protocol, classifying that initial harassment call as a lower priority. They weren't told about a weapon. The verbal harassment, goes lower than it would if it was harassment with a weapon. They said they went off the information they had.
So the slower response time, that wasn't the only criticism the defense made of police. The defense also alleged that IPD had mishandled the investigation afterwards. And in particular, the subject of a backpack came up a lot.
Yeah, so there was a backpack on the scene, which had been identified as Edward Warren's backpack. While law enforcement were on scene, that backpack was picked up by someone else on a bike.
Huh.
So there was motion detected security footage. So there's gaps in the footage. 1 minute it's there, next minute it's gone.
Wow.
The lead investigator for IPD on the case, he said he wasn't aware that there even was a backpack until a couple weeks before the trial.
Oh, whoa.
Which is interesting because that Tompkins County Sheriff's officer had said when he got to scene, he was told to look for a backpack. So you've got some law enforcement knowing about some things that others don't. Chaos, again, a little bit.
And to this day, do we know where the backpack is or who took it?
We do not. And, you have defense who is really like, well, we don't know what was in there. Prosecution saying it doesn't matter.
Still, I mean, I could see the arguments from the defense that what would potentially be a pretty significant piece of evidence that you would probably want is now gone. In addition to the charge of second-degree murder, he was charged with tampering with evidence. Tell me about how that unfolded.
Footage by the apartment complex at Titus Towers at 8:36, so a minute after the stabbing, showed Massaline dropping that knife, getting rid of the hoodie he was wearing at the time. What happened there at Titus Towers was what got him that tampering with evidence charge. But that hoodie was picked up again later, according to security footage, by two unknown women. Those women, I believe, haven't been identified.
The jury acquitted him of that tampering with evidence charge. There were, however, some incidents where Massaline and Camel weren't exactly honest with police. Can you tell me more about those incidents?
Massaline had admitted that he had lied about some things that were said. That included claiming Warren had the knife. He said Warren had yoked him or grabbed him, and that wasn't true. He had said he was scared of being believed, and that's why he lied. The day after the stabbing, police came to Camel and Massaline's apartment. Camel was there, and she initially lied to police. She claimed she had not seen Massaline that night. They admitted it wasn't true. They went to the barbecue.
Right.
And she told police that Massaline didn't know she was even harassed until the next day, which, again, they were on the phone together.
Right.
So, and she suggested that the attacker may have been the bike thief, which she saw the bike thief leave. So it was things like that.
So after all, those 2 days of deliberation, the jury ultimately, like we said, acquitted Massaline of the charge of tampering with evidence. They were not able to reach an agreement on the charge of second-degree murder, which, again, is intent but not premeditation. And Massaline did admit to the stabbing, but what was the jury hung up on?
Yeah, it's hard to tell for sure what they were hung up on, but the main questions were, did it constitute self-defense, or was it an intentional killing? So, I mean, they reviewed that security camera footage from Knapp's car wash 5 more times after, testimony and evidence were already over. They, even requested a frame-by-frame version of that video.
Oh, wow.
And just for context, I mean, that video wasn't really easy to see. It was pretty far away. It wasn't the greatest quality. You have a tree kind of blocking the thing. So it was very difficult footage to work with, which I think kind of contributed to the difficult decision that the jury ultimately couldn't come to. I mean, ultimately they gave the judge a memo that said, we've reached an impasse, and what do we do?
Yeah.
And, the judge, Cassidy, made the ultimate call. He said it's a serious case, but not factually very complex. So he said if they haven't come to a decision now, then I don't know if they're going to in a reasonable time frame.
Right. So he ultimately declared it was a mistrial because, the jury couldn't reach that unanimous decision. What happens next?
After he made that decision, it was pretty chaotic, between what the prosecutors and defense attorneys deciding what does happen next,
Yeah.
Prosecutors, they have an option, in that situation. They can either drop the charges or retry. They immediately chose a retrial.
Oh, wow.
And it's looking like the next possible trial date for that won't be till September.
And that'll be with an entirely new jury.
Yes, new jury.
What is the sentence that he could face if he is indeed convicted of that charge of second-degree murder come September?
Maximum of 25 years to life.
Wow. One of the most interesting things that you found, I think, is a conversation that actually happened outside of the courtroom entirely. You actually ended up talking with Warren, the victim's wife.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're, covering a trial like this, it was 2.5 days of deliberation. So I'm just sitting out there in a hallway for 2.5 days waiting to hear anything from the jury, and you get to know the people who are sitting out there with you. And that whole time, Edward Warren's family was there, and I got to know his wife, Deborah Warren. They had been together for 3 years and were married for 1 year before his death. She is a Black and Puerto Rican woman.
Oh, wow.
And so it was interesting to speak to her because she also has issues with what was said, namely those racial slurs, and said, if he was alive, she'd be yelling at him if he was in jail. And, she isn't happy with what happened, in those final moments and what was said. But she said, even though, she ultimately, wasn't happy with that, it still doesn't justify killing him. She was telling me she's been called slurs before. She was saying she wasn't violent after it, and, so that was her perspective on it.
Right. Because the prosecution has chosen to, rebring that second-degree murder charge, it's looking very likely that there will be another trial in September. What did she say about how she felt about the outcome of this particular trial?
So, first of all, she made it very clear to me that she is strong. She's okay doing this again. She just wants what she says is, justice for what happened. Her thing is she just doesn't understand, she said, what the jury didn't get. She said if Massaline had simply punched Warren, it could have been a different story. And she wants him to be remembered for more than those final moments. She said he was a father and a grandfather, and his daughter's graduation is coming up, and she's devastated that he's missing that.
Thank you so much, Haley, for talking with me and for sitting in that courtroom and those deliberations. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're listening to Backstory. I'm Megan Zerez, speaking with my colleague Haley Potter. We'll be back with the headlines after a short break. Stay with us.
Support for the Ithaca Voice and Backstory comes from a generous grant from the Legacy Foundation of Tompkins County, supporting work that matters since 1945. I'm Jimmy Jordan. Here's some of the other news we've been covering. Cornell banned a recently graduated student from campus after he accused University President Michael Kotlikoff of running over his foot. Aidan Viacio was in a group of students that surrounded Kotlikoff's car about a month ago to question him about campus speech policies. If the recent alum remains in Ithaca, he will not be permitted on campus for a year. On Mother's Day, a pedestrian was hit by a car while crossing the street in Ithaca's North Side neighborhood. The incident sparked residents to push city officials to take a hard look at traffic and safety reforms, but it could take a long time before any changes happen. City council members said they want to conduct a comprehensive traffic study. Anti-surveillance advocates climbed telephone poles and covered flock safety cameras with black plastic bags during the Ithaca Festival Saturday. They held a protest to demand the City of Ithaca and Tompkins County move faster to remove the controversial AI-powered cameras. Both the city and county canceled their contracts with Flock about 3 months ago. Local officials say the cameras are off, and they are working with Flock to remove them. And we hope everyone had a wonderful Ithaca Fest and enjoyed the Ithaca Parade. I was happy to see the Ithaca Volvo Ballet back in action. Who knew tippy toes and revving engines could be that good? You've been listening to Backstory, the podcast powered by the newsroom of the Ithaca Voice. I'm Jimmy Jordan, managing editor. Ron Van Ormer is our executive director. Our photographer is Casey Martin. Our reporters are Fernando Figueroa, Haley Potter, and Megan Zerez, who produces and hosts the show. That's it for this week. Have a good one.